We all have this idea of the person we want to be. A little kinder, maybe more disciplined, more resilient. We often know what the right thing to do is. But man, there is a huge gap between knowing what's right and actually, well, doing it. Today, we're going to explore that exact gap, and we'll do it through a fascinating story that's part fable and part real-life battle. So let's just start right there with the big question. What is it that actually gets in our way? Is it that we just don't know enough, or is it something else, something deeper? I want you to keep that question in the back of your mind as we dive into this. All right, so our story begins in this fictional town called Virtueville. And, you guessed it, the folks living there are on this constant, never-ending quest for self-improvement. They're all trying to figure out how to live a genuinely good life. But of course, that path is never easy, is it? The story uses these two really powerful metaphors for what gets in our way: a fog of ignorance and a quicksand of laziness. And these aren't just flowery words, they represent these very real, very human struggles that just stop us in our tracks. Now, to really understand these obstacles, the story introduces us to a couple of characters from Virtueville, and each one of them basically embodies one of these core failings, which gives us a super clear picture of the problem. So on one hand, you've got Reuven. He's a good dude, right? He's full of all these noble intentions. But his problem, he is completely oblivious to his own flaws. He's like a ship, just sailing in the dead of night, with no map, no compass, totally adrift, and has no idea what's coming. And then you've got Shimon. He's the total opposite. He sees his flaws with crystal clarity. He knows exactly what he needs to do, but he's just stuck, trapped by inaction. He knows where the treasure is buried, but he cannot bring himself to pick up the shovel. I don't know about you, but I think we've all met a Reuven or a Shimon, or maybe even been one ourselves. There's actually this really sharp analogy from ancient wisdom for this exact struggle. It says the pursuit of virtue is like checking if a silver coin is real. See, to prove its value, you can't just know it's supposed to be silver. You have to do the work. You have to weigh it, check it for fakes. In other words, becoming a good person takes both knowledge and action. You just can't have one without the other. It doesn't work. Oh, and there's actually a third group here that kind of combines both of these flaws, the inconsistent. You know these people. They wander from one path to another. They have these little sparks of knowledge, moments of action, but they just lack the commitment to see anything through. All their efforts just fizzle out because they don't have a steady direction. So up to now, we've been looking at this through a story, a fable. Virtueville, Reuven, Shimon, they're all useful ways to think about the problem. But this is where the whole thing gets real. Because it turns out this isn't just some philosophical exercise. The author of this very parable, Corinne Esther Suissa, she wasn't just writing about abstract ideas. She was living them. She was in the middle of her own epic, life-changing struggle. This is her actual journey. It started back in February 2021, when her entire life was turned upside down by just a cascade of health problems. I mean, the diagnoses were relentless: a severe vitamin D deficiency, essential tremors, and this intensely painful condition called complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. But faced with all of that, she refused to just be a passive victim. She became the hero of her own story, fighting back with every single tool she could possibly find. So how in the world did she fight back against something so overwhelming? Well, her story shows us. She basically took on the very obstacles from her own fable, ignorance and inaction, by bridging these timeless principles with some really modern tools. The solution, as the story tells it, really rests on these three pillars. To beat ignorance, you need self-reflection. To fight laziness, you need unwavering determination. And to overcome inconsistency, you need that steadfast commitment. Okay, those are the philosophical keys, right? But how do you actually turn those keys in the real world when you're in the thick of it? Well, this is how. She used technology not as a distraction, but as a weapon. She was consulting specialists through telemedicine. She was gaining that crucial self-knowledge by monitoring her body with wearable tech. She built up her determination using mindfulness apps and even confronted her pain head-on with cutting-edge VR therapy. She even turned her personal struggle into valuable data for researchers by meticulously tracking everything. This wasn't just hope. This was a systematic plan of action. And all of this brings us to the really powerful conclusion, where the fable and that real-life fight, they merge into one single, profound lesson about what it really takes to change. So in the end, Corinne refused to be either character from her own story. She defeated Riven's ignorance by relentlessly seeking knowledge, by tracking her own data, and she overcame Shimon's inaction by using that knowledge to fuel this determined, committed fight for her own life. She became the living, breathing proof that the path to resilience is paved with both knowledge and action. In her own talks, Corinne often brings up this quote from the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, and it just perfectly captures her journey. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Faced with a situation with diagnoses she could not change, she focused everything on what she could change: her response, her mindset, and her actions. And so that leaves all of us with a final, really powerful question to think about. We're all going to face situations that are completely beyond our control. The real test isn't what happens to us, it's what we choose to do about it. So when you find yourself on that difficult path and you can't change the circumstances around you, how will you choose to change yourself?